Why did she always keep her sleeves buttoned, even in the suffocating heat? The steam of the laundry facility curled upward, heavy with detergent and ironed cotton, wrapping the room in a haze that clung to the skin. Soldiers moved in and out with careless urgency, their laughter bouncing off tiled walls, their boots smearing the floor with streaks of mud and grit. Amid all that chaos, she was the still point, silent, invisible, folding one uniform after another with a precision that looked less like labor and more like ritual. Her name tag said, but no one cared. To them, she was just another civilian contractor, another pair of tired hands doing the work no one else wanted. Staff Sergeant shoved through the swinging doors, a wall of muscle followed by three younger soldiers carrying mountains of sweat-stained uniforms. He barked her name like she was a servant, then dumped his load directly onto the pile she had just finished folding. The crisp edges collapsed under the weight of filth. By 0600, combat-ready creases or the colonel will have my ass, he said. She didn't answer, didn't flinch. She simply started over, hands steady, movements deliberate. One of the privates tossed a mud-caked uniform on top with a smirk. That one might need special treatment. We ran drills in the marsh today. Another leaned in close, mocking the way she folded, exaggerating each movement like a child pretending to be an adult. His friends roared with laughter. Think she's military, one whispered loud enough to be heard. Nah, the other said, she wouldn't last a day in basic. Her jaw tightened, barely, a twitch, but her hands never broke rhythm. The uniforms were restored into neat, perfect stacks while their voices echoed behind her. They left as loudly as they had entered. The laughter trailed after them like smoke. And she kept folding, always folding. That was how she survived here, by being unseen. Hours later, another officer came in. Tall, angular, eyes sharp enough to slice through paper. Lieutenant. He inspected his uniforms like a man searching for flaws in everything he touched. This one's wrinkled, he said, holding up a sleeve before tossing it back to the counter. Do it again. No acknowledgement, no thank you, no trace that she was a human being standing in front of him. Just orders, then his boots clicking toward the door. But before he reached it, someone else walked in. Captain Ezra. Unlike the others, his presence didn't demand attention, it carried it. Quiet, steady. A man who had already seen enough to know that shouting wasn't strength. He stepped aside politely nodded once, then placed his own uniform down with more care than she had seen all day. No rush on this one, he said. Her eyes stayed down. Her voice was soft, almost reluctant. He studied her for a fraction too long. It wasn't her name that held him. It was her posture, her positioning, the way she always seemed to know where the exits were, even while her head stayed bowed. Thank you for your service, Ms., he said at last. Her eyes flicked upward, just once, just enough to meet his. I just do laundry, sir. Everyone serves in their own way. He left without another word, but something lingered in the air long after the door shut behind him. Recognition, suspicion, a thread pulled ever so slightly loose. She had been careful, for years, careful enough to survive, careful enough to stay invisible. But invisibility, she had learned, was its own kind of armor. When her shift finally ended, she walked back to the civilian staff quarters, small, functional, and stripped of anything resembling comfort. Her room was spare. A bed, a desk, a dresser. Nothing on the walls, nothing on the surfaces, except for a single photograph face down in the drawer of her nightstand. She checked the lock on the door, once, twice, then opened the narrow closet. The footlocker was there, always there. She spun the combination dial with muscle memory, so familiar she barely registered the numbers. The lid lifted with a metallic groan. Inside, pieces of another life. A battered knife, its grip worn smooth. A medal with the ribbon frayed at the edges. A folded map marked with ink lines long faded. And scars. She sat on the edge of her bed and rolled up her sleeve. Lines of violence crisscrossed her forearms, surgical cuts, jagged slashes, burns that had healed into ridges of pale skin. Each scar was a tally, a memory, a price paid. Firefights in unnamed villages, extraction missions where not everyone came home, decisions made in the dark, paid for in blood. Her fingers traced them as though they were chapters in a story only she could read. For a moment, her eyes softened, far away, reliving battles that official reports would never name. Then she rolled the sleeve back down, buttoned it tight at the wrist, locked the footlocker, returned it to its hiding place. Tomorrow, she would be invisible again. The next morning, her routine shifted. She was assigned to the officers' mess hall to cover for a sick worker. A small change, but change was dangerous. New patterns meant new eyes, new chances for recognition. She carried trays, wiped tables, moved silently between groups of men who hardly noticed her. Conversations carried on around her, deployments, logistics, politics. She was a ghost among them, unseen. Until Major spun in his chair, knocking a tray from her hands. Plates crashed against the floor. The noise cut through the hall like a rifle shot. Every head turned. "Watch yourself, civilian," snapped, his tone dismissive, his eyes already elsewhere. She muttered an apology, crouched, gathered shards with swift precision. But in that moment, just before impact, her body had moved, instinctively, defensively, a shift in stance so subtle most would miss it. Most, but not Captain. From across the room, he watched her movements with a narrowing gaze. Not her apology, not her silence, but the combat reflexes buried beneath them. Reflexes no laundry worker should have. Later that day, he saw her again. From a glass-walled conference room, he noticed her in the corridor below, pushing a laundry cart through the flow of personnel. Her steps were measured, deliberate, always maintaining distance, never exposing her back fully to a doorway. Her eyes scanned in patterns too systematic to be chance. Then the alarm blared. A drill. Personnel hurried to their posts, filling the hall with ordered chaos. Soldiers rushed past her, nearly colliding with her cart. She didn't flinch, didn't stumble. Her eyes followed the security team, tracking their movements, dissecting their formation. Her frown deepened, identifying flaws only a trained operator would see. Leaned forward in his chair, the hairs on his neck prickling. Who was she? That evening, he found her alone in the laundry facility. The machines quiet now, the room still. "You always work this late, Ms." His voice was calm, almost conversational. "Fewer interruptions after hours," she said, not looking up. "Efficient," he replied. "Must get lonely, though." "I prefer quiet." As she reached for a uniform, her sleeve slipped. For a heartbeat, the scars showed. And his blood ran cold. He knew those scars, knew where they came from, knew the operation that had carved them into flesh. Operation Ridge, 2014. A mission so brutal only 3 had survived, and none of them, according to the official record, had been women. But he had seen those scars before. He caught her arm gently, not to restrain, to confirm. "Nightshade," he whispered. Her hand froze, her body stilled, her eyes steel gray lifted to his, and in that instant the disguise fell away. The laundry worker was gone. What stood before him now was something else entirely. A ghost, a weapon, a name erased from records. And then the alarm blared again. This time not a drill. That was when everything began to unravel. Why did the alarm sound different this time? It wasn't the quick, clipped burst of a drill. This one howled through the corridors like a wound torn open, red lights pulsing against white walls, painting soldiers' faces in the colors of panic. The laundry facility shook with it. Steam hissed from the idle machines, shadows flashing across the room as emergency strobes turned the ordinary into the unreal. Security breach in progress, the PA announced, its voice unnaturally calm against the wailing sirens. All personnel to designated secure locations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Captain's radio crackled. He snapped it free from his belt, eyes still locked on hers. Captain, we have multiple system infiltrations. Lieutenant's voice spilled out, strained and uneven. Command center compromised. Perimeter security offline in sectors 3 through 7. I'm on my way, answered. But his hand hovered over the radio longer than necessary, his gaze pulled back to the woman standing in front of him. Her eyes weren't soft anymore. They were sharpened steel, calculating, alive in a way he had never seen before. How long has your cyber team been tracking this? She asked. He blinked. 3 days. How do you know we were tracking anything? Because I've been watching them watching, she said. No hesitation, no stammer, just the voice of someone who already knew the battlefield. Your firewalls have been probed 7 times this week. This isn't random. This is coordinated. She moved for the door, stride purposeful, body language transformed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was herself. Had to quicken his pace to keep up. Where are you going? He demanded. Command center, she shot back. You can't just walk into a secured command center during a breach. Her lips twitched with something that might have been a smile. Watch me. They pushed against the tide of bodies streaming toward bunkers and lockdown zones. Soldiers barked orders, civilians stumbled through panic, the corridors thick with urgency. But she moved differently, calm, fast, but never rushed, always aware, always deliberate. She turned into a service hallway, darker, quieter, the air cooler against their skin. Frowned. How do you know about this route? I make it my business to know all the ways in and out, she said. Just like whoever's attacking your systems right now. The hallway ended at a locked maintenance door. She didn't even pause. A base ID slid from her pocket, swiped across the reader. The light flashed green. The lock clicked open. Stared, where did you get that? Maintenance has access to almost everything, she answered. Nobody notices the people who clean up after everyone else. For a moment, her words carried a weight far beyond the door in front of them. They stepped into the corridor behind the command center. 2 armed guards stiffened immediately. Sir, one began, hand moving to his sidearm. This area is restricted. She's with me, cut in. Security consultant. The guard hesitated. Protocol fought with instinct. But she ended the debate with a single sentence. Your systems are being attacked through a shadow entry point in your supply chain management network. That technique was developed for Operation Stillwater. Unless you want to explain to Colonel Vantage why you delayed the only person who can counter it, open the door. Her tone was unshakable, not pleading, not explaining, commanding. The guard's hand froze. Then, almost reluctantly, he keyed the panel. The door slid open. The command center was chaos. Screens blazed red with warning codes. Voices overlapped in tense urgency. Communication officers scrambled to hold failing networks together. And at the center of it all, Colonel Vantage braced both hands on the tactical table, fury carved into his features as the situation unraveled. His head snapped up at the sight of them. Captain, he said, voice dangerously quiet, what is this civilian doing in my command center? Stepped forward, his words were steady, deliberate. Sir, this is Commander, call sign Nightshade, Special Activities Division, presumed KIA 8 years ago. The name landed like an explosion. Heads turned, hands stilled over keyboards. For a heartbeat, the command center froze. Nightshade, Vantage repeated, his voice flat. The ghost of Samara. Her face revealed nothing. No denial, no confirmation. She simply crossed to an empty terminal, sat and began typing. Her fingers moved with the speed of memory, commands flowing without hesitation. Your security protocols are being exploited by someone with inside knowledge, she said, eyes locked on the screen. 7 vulnerabilities, all predictable. They've been studying you for weeks. Colonel Vantage stared, caught between disbelief and recognition. Without asking permission, she took control. They're in through your supply chain management, a shadow entry point built for Operation Stillwater. I should know. It was one of mine. The words were blunt, cold, a confession and a weapon all at once. For a long moment the colonel said nothing. Then, with the pragmatism of a soldier who had no time for disbelief, he turned. What do you need? Full system access and your best cyber team. He barked an order. Grant Commander Alpha clearance now. For the next minutes, the room became something else. She moved like she belonged there, because she did. Her voice cut through noise with precision, directing teams, identifying threats before they appeared. Under her hand, the attackers' moves were countered, contained, broken apart. It was a battle fought in code, but the rhythm of it was no different from bullets and blood. They're retreating, one specialist said at last, stunned. Attack vectors closing, systems stabilizing. The room exhaled as one. Shoulders dropped, heartbeats slowed. And then all eyes turned to her. Not as the laundry worker, not as the invisible woman, but as Nightshade. When it was over, Vantage studied her for a long time. His gaze was sharp, dissecting, but beneath it there was something else, respect. Commander, he said finally, I don't know why you've been folding laundry on my base for 3 years, but I know you don't belong there. Her voice was calm, steady, but it carried a quiet edge. With respect, sir, sometimes the best place to hide is where no one thinks to look. And why were you hiding? He asked. She straightened, posture snapping into something unmistakably military. That's classified, sir, even from you. Vantage studied her, then gave the faintest nod. Maybe it's time you came out of the shadows, Commander. The following days shifted everything. The same soldiers who had tossed laundry at her feet now stood at attention when she passed, avoided her entirely, his earlier disdain replaced by a silence that felt like shame. Tried an awkward apology, his words tumbling, clumsy, insufficient. She accepted with quiet reserve, not forgiveness, not anger, just restraint. 3 days later, she stood in the memorial garden. A formal uniform hugged her shoulders, medals gleaming in the morning light. They had found it in storage somewhere, dusted off the record of who she had once been. Captain approached, his own dress uniform immaculate. He stopped beside her in silence. Together, they faced the wall of names. The records are being corrected, he said at last. Your team will be remembered. Her hand lifted, fingers tracing a single name carved in stone. Lieutenant Mercer, she said quietly. Turned your brother. She nodded once. The mission that killed him was erased, like he never mattered. Is that why you disappeared? Asked softly. Because of what happened to him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the name. Her voice was even. Partly, the rest is still classified. The silence between them was heavy but not empty. It carried weight, shared understanding. And behind her calm words, the truth pulsed like a wound that had never healed. Why was she suddenly visible after years of being a ghost? The question burned quietly in every corner of Fort Blackwood. Soldiers who once tossed mud-caked uniforms at her now stepped aside in silence when she passed. Conversations stopped the moment she entered a room. Even the laughter in the hallways seemed more cautious, as if the base itself had adjusted to her presence. She hadn't asked for recognition. She hadn't asked for the whispers. But once the mask of invisibility fell, there was no putting it back on. She walked with her shoulders square now. No more downcast eyes. No more shrinking into the shadows. Yet each step carried weight, because every glance that followed her reminded her of the danger that came with being seen. On the 4th day after the breach, She was summoned to Colonel Vantage's office. The room was stark, military efficient. A wide desk, a wall of maps, blinds half drawn against the noon light. Vantage sat behind the desk, file open, his gaze never lifting as she entered. She came to parade rest, silent, waiting. For minutes he said nothing, just read. The weight of the pause was deliberate, a test. Finally he closed the folder with a measured slap. "Your record is impressive, Commander, even with the redactions." His eyes locked on hers, cold, assessing. "I've spoken with Division. They're very interested in your resurrection." She said nothing. Silence was sometimes sharper than words. Vantage leaned back. "Care to tell me why one of our most decorated special operators has been folding laundry on my base for 3 years?" Her face was composed marble. "As I said before, sir, that information remains classified." The colonel's jaw ticked once. He didn't like unanswered questions, but he was also a realist. He leaned forward again, voice lower. "Division wants you back in the field. Your commission is being reactivated, effective immediately." A long pause stretched between them. For the first time, she let something flicker across her features, uncertainty. A muscle tightened at her jaw, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "And if I decline?" "Then you can go back to folding laundry," Vantage said. The words were dry, edged. "But somehow I don't believe that's what you want. Do you?" Her voice came slower this time. "No, sir, but I left for reasons that haven't changed." Vantage studied her, leaning back in his chair again. His tone softened, not by much, but enough to carry a hint of humanity. "Sometimes the best way to honor the dead isn't by disappearing yourself. It's by continuing the work they believed in." The words cut deeper than he knew. She didn't show it, but her posture shifted, small but real. She gave a short nod. The conversation was over. "Take some time," Vantage said. "Think about where you can do the most good." That evening she walked the training grounds alone. The air was sharp with the scent of dust and sweat. Recruits stumbled through morning drills, their movements uncoordinated, their lungs burning. She watched them with the distant eyes of someone who remembered when she had been on that field, pushed until her body broke, then forced to rise again. "Coffee." Captain's voice came from behind her. He held 2 steaming cups, extended one silently. She accepted with a nod, sipping as her gaze stayed fixed on the recruits. "Colonel Vantage tells me Division wants you back," he said. "They do. Will you accept?" She considered the question with the same weight she gave every decision. "I spent 3 years hiding in plain sight. Invisibility becomes a habit, but habits don't heal wounds." "Seems like a lonely existence," said. "It was necessary." She turned to face him fully. "Did you know there was an investigation after Samara?" He shook his head. "I heard rumors, nothing more." Her eyes darkened with memory. Operation Kingfisher, supposed to be a clean extraction, but someone in our own command structure was selling information, leaks that cost lives. He frowned. "Was that why you disappeared, to investigate?" Her smile was thin, bitter. "No, I disappeared because someone tried to make sure I stayed dead. When I survived, it became clear my existence was inconvenient." His expression hardened. "And now Division wants you back. Do you think it's safe?" Safe was never part of the job description. She looked back at the recruits, their youth carved in sweat and inexperience. "But hiding hasn't solved anything. The people responsible are still out there, still in uniform, still holding power. You think going back will help you find them?" "It might, or it might put me in their crosshairs again." She straightened, her voice certain. "But I didn't join to be safe. I joined to make a difference." Later, she was called to a plain, windowless office deep inside administration. The man waiting for her had no insignia, but his bearing carried authority. "Commander," he said, "I'm Director. I've been asked to brief you on recent developments." She sat silent, waiting. The individuals you were concerned about have advanced considerably. The one you knew as Vesper now oversees multiple operations in the Eastern Theater. Archer has moved to strategic planning across 3 regions. Her eyes stayed sharp, but the air seemed heavier. And the evidence I gathered before Samara. His expression remained neutral, missing, along with the backups. Her lips tightened, her tone edged with contempt. Convenient. There are those who believe you fabricated it, that your disappearance was confession by another name. Her jaw hardened. A convenient narrative, especially since the inquiry was led by Vesper himself. Leaned forward. Your reappearance presents opportunities. Some of us never believed the official version of Samara. We want you to accept reactivation. Return to duty. Let them believe you've been broken, rehabilitated, neutralized. She narrowed her eyes. You want me to spy on my own command? Not spy, corrected softly. Serve your country the way you always have, by identifying and neutralizing threats, even when they wear the same uniform you do. Silence stretched between them. And who do I report to? She asked at last. How do I know this isn't another trap? Reached into his jacket, slid a small flash drive across the desk. This contains protocols and verification codes. The only other copies are held by individuals I don't know. Compartmentalization is necessary. She turned the drive in her hand, fingers brushing its edges like it carried more weight than metal should. And my brother, her voice cracked just faintly. He died because of their betrayal. Will there be justice for him? If we succeed, yes. His name will be cleared, his sacrifice recognized. His voice softened. I knew Mercer, he deserved better. She slipped the drive into her pocket. Her answer was quiet, firm. When do I start? Transport leaves for division headquarters at 600 tomorrow. He stood. One last thing, Commander, trust no one, not even me. The next morning, dawn broke cold and pale. The mountains cut sharp lines into the horizon. She stood on the tarmac with a duffel at her feet, uniform sharp against her frame. Colonel Vantage approached first. He extended his hand. Commander, I wish you well. I hope you find what you're looking for. She shook his hand firmly. His words carried layers, an understanding he didn't voice. Then approached, standing awkwardly until she reached him. He straightened to attention out of instinct. At ease, Captain, she said softly. We're past formalities. He relaxed, but only slightly. I never told you. I was part of the search team in Samara. We found the bodies of your team, but not yours. I always wondered why. Her voice was quieter now. I was separated during the ambush, took shelter in an abandoned building. By the time I could move again, both sides were gone. You made it out alone. 18 days on foot. Her eyes clouded at the memory. When I reached friendly lines, the accusations had already spread. Someone decided I was dead or guilty. Both were easier than the truth. Studied her face, and now you're walking right back into it. Her lips curved with a bitter truth. Sometimes the only way out is through. She extended her hand. Thank you, Captain, for seeing me when no one else did. He took it, held it a second longer than necessary. His voice was low. Be careful, Commander. Always am. The transport roared to life. She climbed aboard, duffel slung over her shoulder. Through the window, she watched Fort Blackwood shrink beneath her, the place where she had hidden reduced to a patch of concrete against endless wilderness. She felt exposed again. After years of invisibility, the world could see her. It was freeing, terrifying, and inevitable. Why did her return feel less like a homecoming and more like walking back into a trap? 6 hours after leaving Fort Blackwood, the transport touched down at division headquarters. The sprawling complex stretched across the valley floor, ringed with fences, towers, and layers of security so dense it almost looked like a fortress. But to his eyes, it was something else entirely, a cage. The air smelled of disinfectant and jet fuel. Soldiers moved with clipped efficiency. Everything was controlled here, precise, rehearsed. She descended the steps of the transport with her duffel slung over one shoulder, uniform crisp, insignia sharp against the morning light. A man waited at the bottom of the ramp. Major Reeves. His posture was stiff, his face unreadable. "Commander," he said flatly, "welcome back to the land of the living." His tone left no doubt her presence wasn't celebrated. It was tolerated, suspected. "You'll be debriefed immediately. Follow me." The debriefing room was built for intimidation. White walls, steel table, a line of fluorescent lights that hummed just enough to gnaw at the nerves. 3 senior officers sat waiting, files in front of them, expressions carved from stone. Entered, shoulders squared, eyes neutral. She recognized one of them instantly. Colonel Victor, call sign, Vesper. The man who had led the investigation into Samara. The man who had erased her team. The man whose betrayal had left her brother's name carved into a stone wall. He didn't flinch when he saw her. No widening of the eyes. No sharp intake of breath. Just the faintest curve of his lips as though he'd been expecting her. "Commander," he said smoothly, "your reappearance is remarkable. We had presumed you killed in action." Her reply was cool, controlled. "Clearly an error, sir." He leaned back, studying her like a specimen under glass. Indeed, one of many surrounding Samara, it seems. His eyes flicked to the file in front of him. "You understand there are questions about your activities, both during that mission and in the years since." "I'm prepared to answer, sir." "Good," said. "Let's begin with this. Why assume a false identity? Why fold laundry on a base when you could have reported in?" Her voice was measured. "Injury, disorientation, loss of purpose. The team I trusted was gone. I chose anonymity." Half-truths, fragments of the story, bent just enough to seem plausible. The questioning went on for hours. They asked about Samara, about her escape, about the years between. She gave them a version of the truth stripped of teeth, a story of survival, of retreat, of disillusionment. All the while she watched. His small tells hadn't changed. The way his fingers tapped once before he leaned forward. The way his eyes narrowed just slightly when he thought he had the upper hand. He believed he was in control. Believed she was broken, hesitant, diminished. Let him believe it, she thought. Let him underestimate me again. When it ended, they assigned her quarters. Private but monitored. She swept the room the moment the door shut behind her. Found 2 audio bugs, 1 camera, the obvious ones, which meant there were more, hidden where only someone on the inside would know. She unpacked with methodical precision, placing her few possessions in ways that would reveal if anyone tampered with them. The flash drive stayed hidden in the secret pocket of her uniform. When the lights dimmed and the hallways fell silent, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Memories pressed in, her brother's voice, her team's laughter, the smell of Samara's burning streets. Her whisper broke the silence. "I'm going to finish what we started, Mercer, I promise." The reintegration program began at 500 the next morning. Physical assessment, psychological evaluation, cognitive testing, every trial designed to push, to measure, to categorize her. Her body responded as though no time had passed. Years of hiding hadn't erased what the training had carved into her bones. She outlasted the runs, outscored the combat drills. Her reflexes cut sharper than recruits half her age. Instructors exchanged looks, some impressed, some suspicious. Her mind, too, hadn't dulled. The psychological tests meant to disorient her, to probe for weaknesses. She turned them back, answering with a precision that gave nothing away. By midday, she was summoned again, this time to the office of General Chief of Operations. He didn't rise when she entered. He was a broad-shouldered man with calculating eyes, the kind that weighed everything and everyone like assets on a ledger. "Commander," he said, "your results are impressive." "Thank you, sir." Cut the formality, said. He gestured at the chair across from his desk. Sit. She obeyed, her posture perfect. I'll be direct, continued. Half my staff thinks you're a traitor who should be in prison. The other half thinks you're a scapegoat who might still be useful. I haven't decided which is true. With respect, sir, my record spoke for itself before Samara. And after, his eyes sharpened. What does going AWOL for 3 years say about your commitment to duty? Her voice didn't waver. It says I was willing to do whatever was necessary to survive, even when that meant disappearing. Leaned back, expression unreadable. You'll be assigned to Colonel's command group. He specifically requested you. A flicker crossed her eyes, gone before it could register. I understand, sir. Do you? Because he led the investigation that declared you compromised. If you're harboring resentment, this is your chance to speak. Her face was stone. The investigation followed protocol, sir. I have no personal feelings. Good, said, though his tone suggested he didn't fully believe her. Is about to oversee one of our most critical operations. He wants you on it. He slid a file across the desk. Operation Broken Arrow. Briefing at 800 tomorrow. As she left his office, the weight of eyes followed her down the hallway. Whispers curled behind her, quick and quiet. Her return wasn't a clean slate. It was a fault line running beneath the foundation. That night, she walked alone to the memorial garden within the division compound. The air was still, the wall of names lit by soft lamps. Her fingers traced the engraved letters of her brother's name again. Closer, Mercer, she whispered. Closer than I've been in years. A footstep made her turn. Captain. Captain, she said, surprised. Special assignment, he explained, stepping closer. I've been temporarily attached to division. Operation Broken Arrow. Her eyes narrowed. Convenient timing. I requested it, he admitted, when I heard you'd been placed on the team. She studied him, suspicion flickering. You thought I'd need someone watching my back. His smile was grim. I thought you might, and maybe I would too. She turned back to the wall, her hand resting against her brother's name. Her voice was low. Trust is a luxury I can't afford, Captain. Not now. Maybe not trust, he said, but allies. He offered his hand, whatever comes next. Her hand met his, firm, brief, silent agreement. Whatever comes next, she echoed. That night as the base slept, lay awake, the file on Broken Arrow still sealed in her memory, had requested her by name, the same man who had buried her team. He thought she was broken. And that was his mistake. Why would Colonel, of all people, request her by name? The question lingered in her chest like a weight as she walked the sterile corridors the next morning. The briefing room was already filling when she arrived, officers filing into seats, screens glowing with satellite imagery, coded overlays, red zones flashing urgent warnings. She stepped inside, the murmur of voices dropping a notch. Some stared outright, others looked away quickly, as though afraid that meeting her eyes might reveal something about themselves. The legend of Nightshade had traveled fast, too fast. At the head of the table, Colonel Victor waited. His uniform was immaculate, his posture flawless, his presence radiating command. He looked up when she entered and smiled. Not the warmth of reunion, not even the of respect. The smile of a man who believed he still controlled the board. Operation Broken Arrow, he began once the room settled. His voice was smooth, practiced, honed over years of command briefings. Our intelligence indicates a series of coordinated attacks against division supply lines across the Eastern Theater. Unconventional, adaptive, designed not for destruction, but destabilization. He gestured and the screen behind him lit with grainy footage. Convoys ambushed, depots set ablaze, networks disrupted. These attacks compromise not only our logistics but our credibility with Allied commands. If we cannot secure our supply chains, We cannot sustain operations. His eyes flicked deliberately too. Our task force will neutralize this threat at its root. Embedded operatives, funding pipelines, cyber infiltration. The enemy has become creative, so must we. He paced slowly as he spoke, weaving the room into his rhythm. You've been chosen for your skill sets. Each of you brings something essential. Together, you will dismantle this network. His gaze lingered on her again. Commander brings unique expertise. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone knew what he was saying without saying it. She was both weapon and liability, asset and question mark. After the briefing, officers clustered in hushed groups, their voices clipped with speculation. Felt the weight of every glance, every whisper. She didn't respond, didn't explain. Silence was still her sharpest blade. Fell into step beside her as they exited. He's putting you right in the middle, he murmured. That's the point, she answered quietly. Why request you, after everything? Her lips curved with a bitter edge. Because he thinks I'm broken, and broken things are easy to use. Shook his head, or easy to dispose of. She didn't argue, because he wasn't wrong. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation, team assignments, intel packets, secure channels. She studied everything with the eye of someone who trusted nothing. Every map, every timeline, every order. Looking for seams, inconsistencies, fingerprints of the betrayal she already suspected. At night, she returned to her quarters, methodically swept for bugs she already knew were there. Sat in silence, fingers brushing the hidden flash drive in her uniform. She hadn't used it yet. His voice echoed in her mind, trust no one, not even me. So she waited. The first field briefing took place in a secure war room underground. No windows, just banks of screens, long tables, and the low hum of servers. Stood at the front again, flanked by aides who looked as if they hadn't slept in days. We've identified a potential hub for enemy operations, he said, tapping the screen. A city lit with red markers appeared, supply depots, communications towers, transport nodes. We believe key players are embedded there, disguised as civilian contractors. Your team will infiltrate, identify, and extract targets for interrogation. A captain across the table frowned. Sir, with respect, intelligence on this is thin, could be a setup. Every operation is a risk, Captain said smoothly. That's why we send our best. Again his eyes slid too. When the meeting ended, she lingered in the shadows of the room until the others left. Only remained, gathering his notes. She stepped closer, her voice low. Why am I really here, Colonel? He didn't look up, didn't pause in his movements. Because you're useful. Her jaw tightened. You buried my team. Now he looked at her. His eyes were calm, almost bored. I investigated a compromised operation. You were presumed dead. Don't confuse bureaucracy with betrayal. His words were smooth, polished, but she heard the lie under them. The same lie that had erased Mercer from history. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Consider this, Commander. Ghosts are powerful. Legends inspire fear, but ghosts also fade. The only way you matter now is if you serve a purpose. This operation gives you one. Don't waste it. Her pulse was steady, but inside something twisted. He thought he was playing her. He thought the years of silence had weakened her. Let him think it. That night she sat alone in her quarters, staring at the file on broken arrows spread across the desk. Maps, intercepted comms, supply chain logs. At first glance it was all solid, clean, precise. But she knew better than to trust clean. She ran her fingers across the pages, memory reaching back to Samara, to the briefings that had led them into an ambush, to the intel that had seemed too perfect. This smelled the same. The next morning, as the team gathered for departure drills, caught her arm briefly. His eyes searched hers. You're holding something back. She didn't deny it. There are patterns in the intel, too neat, too deliberate. Either's been fed bad information or he's feeding it to us. Exhaled sharply. If you're right, we're walking into another Samara. Her voice was steel. Then we walk in with our eyes open this time. The transport lifted them into gray skis, the drone of engines filling the cabin. Soldiers checked gear, murmured to each other, their faces taut with anticipation and nerves. Sat silent, hands steady as she inspected her weapon, not because she needed to, because ritual steadied the mind. Across from her watched, he didn't speak, didn't need to. Her mind was elsewhere. On Mercer, on the names etched into stone, on the truth buried under years of silence. This wasn't just another mission. This was the thread, the line that could pull everything into the light or snap, leaving her buried for good. Hours later, the city came into view through the transport's small windows, lights sprawling across the horizon, streets winding like veins. The pilot's voice crackled over comms, approaching insertion zone. The team stood, weapons ready, adrenaline tightening their bodies. Rose with them, her presence quiet but commanding. No one looked at her as a laundry worker anymore. No one dared. The ramp opened. Cold night air swept inside. The city below glimmered with secrets. And as they jumped, she carried one thought with her. This was operation. It was hers. Why did the city look too quiet from above? From the transport's ramp watched the sprawl below. Streets glimmered faintly with late-night traffic, neon bleeding against the fog. On the surface it was alive, restless. But to her eyes, trained to catch what others missed, it looked rehearsed, ordered, like a stage where the actors hadn't yet stepped into their roles. The team hit the ground hard, boots against asphalt. The cold night wrapped around them, damp with the smell of diesel and salt from the nearby harbor. The transport peeled away into the clouds, leaving silence in its wake. Captain checked comms, team secure, moving to grid point. They moved in formation through narrow streets, their gear heavy but practiced, their eyes darting to shadows. Walked near the center, every step precise, every glance calculating. To the rest of the team she was an enigma, once a ghost, now suddenly in command spotlight. To her, every detail of this environment screamed wrong. Their first target was an abandoned warehouse marked on Division's intel as a suspected hub. The building loomed at the edge of the docks, its windows shattered, its steel doors rusted but recently forced open. Clear it, ordered. The team swept inside. Dust, empty crates, the echo of boots against concrete, nothing else. Moved slowly, her flashlight grazing the walls. The place had been used, but not for long. Too clean for a hub, too staged for a hideout. Commander asked quietly. Her fingers brushed over a section of wall where the dust pattern was broken. She knelt, tracing it, faint scuff marks, too deliberate. They knew we'd come here, she murmured. Hours blurred into patterns of movement, intel point after intel point. Each site led to the next as though someone had left a breadcrumb trail for them. Safe houses already abandoned, documents left in plain sight, hard drives wiped but not fully, enough to hint at activity, enough to keep the team chasing. It didn't feel like discovery, it felt like choreography. By the fourth site, cornered her outside the perimeter. His voice was low, sharp. This is too neat, even for clean ops. I know, she said. Then why are we still following? Because the pattern tells us more than the evidence, she replied. And because walking away now shows our hand. Whoever's behind this is watching. His jaw clenched. He didn't like it. Neither did she. But sometimes the only way forward was straight into the teeth of the trap. At 300 hours, Division ordered them to consolidate at a hotel turned near the city's center. It was cover, temporary, flimsy. The kind of place she'd avoided her entire career. Too many windows, too many angles. Still the team obeyed. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and stale cigarette smoke. Beds stripped bare. Lamps crooked. the kind of place forgotten by everyone except the desperate. As the others settled, stood at the window watching the street below, a stray dog nosed through trash bags. A truck rolled slowly past, its engine too quiet for its size. She didn't like it. "You're not resting," said, stepping beside her. "Neither are you." "Because I've been in places like this," he admitted, "and they all end the same way." She turned slightly, studying him. There was exhaustion in his face, but also something steadier, loyalty, maybe, or conviction. The kind of thing she hadn't let herself trust in years. Her voice dropped. "If this is a trap, the order came from division itself, which means Broken Arrow isn't about neutralizing enemy networks. It's about neutralizing me." Didn't argue, didn't try to soften it. He just nodded, the truth too heavy to deny. The breach came at dawn. The first sign was silence, the kind that pressed too deep, too complete. The city outside muffled like someone had turned down the volume. Then the glass shattered. Gunfire tore the air, splinters exploding across the room. The team scrambled, shouting orders, returning fire through broken windows. Shadows moved in the streets below, dozens of them, advancing with precision. Not raiders, not freelancers, soldiers. Contact left, a sergeant screamed, diving behind cover. Rolled across the floor, rifle already sighted, her body moving in the old rhythm, the one muscle memory had carved into her bones. Her shot dropped a figure in the doorway before the man could fire. Pulled her down beside him. "They knew exactly where we'd be." "Of course they did," she snapped. Her eyes swept the room, calculating angles, entry points, escape routes. "This isn't the enemy. This is division cleaning up its own mess." The firefight lasted minutes that felt like hours. Bullets ricocheted off plaster and steel. The smell of cordite burned thick in the air. Half the team went down before they even had time to return proper fire. The survivors were bleeding, cornered, desperate. "Rear exit," shouted, motioning toward the back stairwell. "Move." Hesitated. "That's boxed in." "Not if we make it unboxed." She lobbed a grenade into the stairwell. The explosion ripped a hole through crumbling plaster, opening a path into the alley beyond. Smoke poured through the gap. "Go," she barked, dragging one of the wounded soldiers to his feet. They spilled into the alley, sprinting through haze, bullets chasing their heels. The city's maze twisted around them, alleys narrowing, streets branching, rooftops looming above. By the time they reached the river, only 5 of them remained. 2 privates, both shaken and bleeding, and her. The rest were gone. They crouched beneath a rusting bridge, lungs heaving, the river's stench thick in their throats. Pressed a bandage to one private's arm, his hand steady despite the adrenaline shaking through him. Scanned the shadows, her rifle steady, her pulse slowing with practiced control. One private finally broke the silence. "What the hell was that? They were trained, they moved like us." "They were us," said flatly. The words hung heavy, undeniable. Looked at her. She nodded once. Broken Arrow isn't about logistics, it's about control. Erase me, erase the truth. Tie up the last loose end from Samara. The privates exchanged terrified glances. One whispered, "Why bring us if?" "Because collateral damage makes it cleaner," cut in. Her voice softened a fraction. "You weren't supposed to walk out." Silence fell again, broken only by the river's slow churn. As night swallowed the city again, they moved. Quiet, hidden, avoiding patrols that didn't wear the enemy's insignia but their own. Every step deepened her conviction. Hadn't just orchestrated Samara, he was orchestrating this. Broken Arrow was a purge. And now she carried proof, not in files or hard drives but in survival, witnesses. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of purpose settle back into her bones. This wasn't about hiding anymore. This was about war. They reached the edge of the city at dawn, slipping into the shell of an abandoned factory. Exhaustion pressed on them like lead. The privates collapsed against walls, too spent to move. Lowered himself beside them, silent, eyes on her. She stood at the broken window, watching the horizon bleed with pale light. Her body ached, her heart hammered, but her mind was clear. "They'll send more," said. "I know. And division will call it an enemy ambush." She turned from the window, her expression hard. "Then it's time to stop reacting, time to take this fight to them." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "What's the move?" Her hand brushed the hidden pocket in her uniform, the flash drive's weight pressing against her side. "We stop being ghosts," she said. "We start being hunters." The city behind them was still smoldering when they disappeared into the countryside. To the world, the mission had failed, another casualty of war. But to it had only just begun. Why does survival feel heavier than death? The abandoned factory walls groaned in the morning wind, metal beams rusting, windows cracked. The 5 survivors sat in silence, backs against cold concrete, every breath a reminder of what they had escaped. Only hours before, they'd been soldiers on a sanctioned mission. Now they were fugitives in their own war. Stood apart, silhouetted against the jagged window. Her eyes swept the horizon, but her thoughts were elsewhere, on Samara, on her brother, on the truth she could no longer bury. Approached quietly, his voice low so the privates couldn't hear. "We can't stay here. They'll sweep the city, widen the net." She didn't turn. "I know." "Then what's the plan?" Her fingers brushed the skin of her forearm through the fabric of her sleeve, as if grounding herself. "The plan is simple. We stop running." By nightfall, they'd abandoned the factory, moving in pairs through farmland and back roads. No vehicles, no comms, no electronic trail. The younger soldiers were exhausted, their bodies stumbling, their eyes hollow with the shock of betrayal. They'd signed up to fight an enemy. Instead, they'd been sacrificed by their own command. Didn't coddle them, but she didn't ignore them either. At rest stops, she checked wounds, redistributed weight, and forced food into hands that shook too badly to hold rations. Her care was efficient, unspoken, the kind of leadership born not from speeches but from survival. One private, barely 19, finally broke the silence as they camped in a drainage culvert. "Ma'am, why us? Why send us if we weren't supposed to make it?" Her gaze was steady, voice low. "Because expendable assets make the story believable. The reports will say you were ambushed. Wrong place, wrong time. No one questions it when soldiers die." The boy swallowed hard, eyes shining with something between fear and rage. "So we're just names on a wall." Her answer was quiet. "Not if we refuse to disappear." They reached the mountains by the 3rd night. Thick forest swallowed the roads, air thinner, colder. It was here that led them to an old cabin tucked against the slope, half collapsed from years of disuse. "How do you know this place?" asked as they pushed inside. "Because I've been here before," she said simply. She didn't explain further, and he didn't press. The cabin smelled of rot and damp earth, but it was shelter. They boarded the broken windows, built a small fire that couldn't be seen from the ridge. For the first time since the ambush, the privates slept. Didn't. She sat at the rickety table, the flash drive from in her hand. She turned it over and over, the metal warm from her palm. Inside it lay verification codes, hidden channels, proof of a network still watching. But trust was a currency she no longer carried. At dawn, joined her. He didn't ask permission, just sat across the table, his face drawn with fatigue. "You've been holding back," he said quietly. She met his gaze, no denial. "Yes." "What's on that drive?" Her fingers stilled against the metal. She considered him for a long moment, weighing risks. Finally, she spoke. "Protocols, contacts, evidence that division isn't what it pretends to be." His jaw tightened, so was right. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Warned me not to trust him, which means he's either the only ally I have, or the most dangerous enemy. Either way, said, you're not carrying this alone anymore. For the first time, she let silence linger without resistance. Not agreement, not surrender, but the smallest crack in the armor. 3 days later, they made contact. It happened in a roadside diner at the edge of a dying town, the kind of place where no one asked names and the coffee tasted of rust. Entered first, shadowing her, the privates spread in pairs to watch the exits. At the counter sat a woman in civilian clothes, dark hair tied back, posture too precise for an ordinary traveler. Her fingers tapped a code against her cup, 3 short, 2 long, 3 short. Replied with 2 long, 2 short. The woman looked up, recognition flashed. Commander, she said softly, you're supposed to be dead. Slid into the booth opposite her, so I keep hearing. The woman's name was an intelligence analyst once buried deep in Division's cyber wing. She leaned close, voice barely above a whisper. Word is, cleaning house. Anyone who questions him disappears. Samara wasn't the first. It won't be the last. His eyes narrowed, proof. Slipped a folded paper across the table. Inside was a list of coded designations, teams, missions, all red-lined. Each one marked compromised. Her chest tightened. These are kill lists. Nodded grimly. And Broken Arrow wasn't an op. It was a purge. You were the centerpiece. A ghost resurrected only to be buried again. But you survived, which means we'll move faster now. His hand clenched against the table. So what do we do? Folded the paper, tucking it into her pocket. Her voice was steel. We hunt the hunter. Back at the cabin, she laid the list across the table, the privates watching with wide, uncertain eyes. These names, she explained, are the people couldn't control, operatives who asked questions, analysts who found cracks, soldiers who survived what they shouldn't have. They're being erased, quietly, efficiently. One private whispered, so it's not just us. No, she said firmly, it never was. She spread a crude map across the table. We're going to find them, as many as we can. Piece by piece we build a network, not ghosts hiding in laundry rooms, hunters. The room fell silent. Then slowly one private nodded, then another. The war had changed. Over the next weeks their lives blurred into movement, hidden frequencies. One by one they found survivors of Purge, a demolitions expert hiding under a false identity, a signals officer who'd faked his own death, a medic turned smuggler. Each one carried scars, each one carried secrets. And each one, when shown the list, chose to join. Stood with her through it all, his quiet presence steady. Sometimes, late at night, he'd watch her across the campfire, as though trying to understand the weight she carried. Once, when the others had drifted to sleep, he finally asked, "Why keep going, after everything, after Samara, after years of hiding? Why not just walk away?" She stared into the flames. "Because my brother believed in what we swore, and they killed him for it. Walking away would mean they were right, that none of it mattered." Her voice softened just slightly, "And I can't let his name be forgotten." By the second month their numbers had grown. Not an army, not yet, but a network scattered, hidden, angry. Still controlled Division's official channels, but beneath the surface something else was forming, something that moved in shadows not to hide, but to strike. Stood at the edge of a forest clearing, her people around her, their faces lit by the glow of a lantern. "Division thinks we're broken," she said, her voice low but carrying. "They think ghosts fade. They think betrayal erases loyalty." Her eyes swept across them, hard, unflinching. "They're wrong." The silence that followed was not fear, it was resolve. And in that moment, she knew, the war she had avoided for years was no longer optional. It had already begun. Why does justice always feel heavier than revenge? The forest clearing faded behind them as weeks turned into months. The network grew, shadows gathering in forgotten spaces, allies long thought dead resurfacing like ghosts who had waited for a signal. Had become that signal. The scars on her arms, once a secret buried beneath long sleeves, were now her banner, not worn in pride but in defiance. Proof that she had survived what others hadn't, and that survival meant she carried their voices with her. The hunt for had begun. It started with whispers, small strikes, supply caches disappearing, false intel fed back into division system, rerouted until trusted channels began to collapse under the weight of their own contradictions. Then came the rescues, analysts pulled from black sites, operatives extracted from accidental assignments designed to silence them. Each one added to the circle, each one carried another piece of the puzzle. But it was never enough. The truth about Samara, about Broken Arrow, about Mercer's death, it all lived inside. He was the architect, the cleaner, the spider at the center of the web. And spiders did not fall easily. The opportunity came with Operation Iron Citadel, a division summit held in a fortified compound under the guise of coordinating Allied logistics. Every senior commander would be there, including. For it was more than a chance, it was inevitability. Walking in there is suicide, said when she laid the plan across the table of yet another. Then we walk in like ghosts, she answered. Her eyes swept across the faces gathered, soldiers, analysts, survivors. The broken pieces of division's betrayal forged into something harder. We don't need an army, we just need the truth to speak for itself. The night of the summit, the compound blazed with light, fences humming with electricity, guards packing with predictable rhythm. Watch from the ridge, her pulse steady, her breath even. The plan was simple but brutal, breach the compound not with bullets but with information. Inside her pocket the flash drive had given her still waited. For months she'd carried it without trust. Tonight it was her weapon. "Are you ready for this?" asked quietly, crouched beside her. Her reply was calm. "I've been ready since Samara." They entered through the shadows of maintenance tunnels, slipping past guards distracted by false alerts triggered across the perimeter. The team moved silent, precise, every step rehearsed in her mind 100 times. The command hall was a fortress of glass and steel, its interior buzzing with officers in dress uniforms, their conversations clipped, calculated. Walk straight through the main entrance. The guards froze, their eyes narrowing at the sight of her. Civilian clothes but posture unmistakable, followed at her shoulder, his ID flashing division clearance. For a moment hesitation reigned, then one guard stepped aside. Invisibility had never been about hiding. It had always been about walking where no one expected you to. The briefing was all ready when she entered. Stood at the front, his voice filling the room, his tone authoritative, his words weaving strategy and control. He was every inch the commander division believed him to be. Until the room stilled. Until stepped into the light. Murmurs spread like wildfire, eyes widened, a name whispered on every lip. Nightshade. His composure didn't crack, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, narrowed with recognition, and for the first time unease. "Commander," he said smoothly, "what an unexpected resurrection." Her voice carried across the room, calm but sharp enough to cut steel. "You buried my team. You erased my brother. You turned Samara into a graveyard of lies." The silence was total. No one moved, no one breathed. Smile was thin, strong accusations, from a woman presumed compromised for 8 years. "Shall we discuss this privately?" "No," she said firmly. "We'll discuss it here, where every officer in this room can hear the truth." She pulled the flash drive from her pocket, holding it up for all to see. "This contains communications you buried, proof of leaks, proof of deliberate sabotage, names of operatives marked for purge." She crossed to the console, sliding the drive into the port. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then the screens lit, lines of code unraveling into decrypted files, messages, orders signed with authorization. List purged teams, altered reports. Operation Broken Arrow reframed not as strategy but as extermination. Gasps filled the hall, chairs scraped, officers turned on one another in disbelief. His mask cracked, his voice rose, sharp with authority that sounded more desperate than commanding. This is fabrication, a desperate woman clinging to relevance. Enough, cut him off. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of every scar, every betrayal, every life erased. You thought ghosts fade. You thought silence erases the dead, but silence only sharpens memory. And tonight, her eyes swept the room, meeting faces that had once looked past her. Memory speaks. The hall erupted into chaos, officers shouting, guards frozen, unsure of who held authority, screens still glowing with the evidence of betrayal. Moved fast, hand dropping toward his weapon. But was faster. Her pistol was out before the thought finished forming in his mind. She didn't aim at his head. She didn't aim to kill. The bullet shattered the floor inches from his boots. He froze. "Stand down, Colonel," she said, her voice steady. "You'll face justice, not a bullet. That's more mercy than you ever gave." Division did not crumble overnight. Corruption never dies in a single stroke. But that night, the tide shifted. The files spread through encrypted channels faster than they could be silenced. Officers once silent found their voices, and the man who had believed himself untouchable found himself shackled, his empire cracking beneath him. Didn't celebrate. She walked out of the compound into the night air, the weight of survival pressing heavier than the fight. Followed, silent at her side. At the ridge overlooking the city, she stopped, her gaze distant. "You did it," he said softly. Her reply was quiet. "No, we did it. And the ones who didn't walk out of Samara did it. Mercer did it. I just carried the scars long enough for someone to listen." For a long time they stood in silence, the night wind pulling at their uniforms. Finally she whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." In the months that followed, the records changed. Her brother's name restored. Her team honored. The whispers of Nightshade no longer a ghost story but a reminder of resilience, of defiance, of survival. Never sought the spotlight. She never asked for recognition. But when history tried to erase her, she answered the only way she knew how: by refusing to disappear.